We all know that feeling, right? That sense of dread or worry we call anxiety. But what is actually going on inside our brains when that happens? Well, in this explainer, we're going to go way beyond just the feeling and get to the facts. We'll explore the fascinating science of how our brains create and respond to fear. Let's dive in. You've probably been there. That sudden, overwhelming wave where your heart is just pounding out of your chest and you can't catch your breath. It's intense, and honestly, it can be pretty terrifying. So you have to wonder, what's the real difference between the two? Okay, so to answer that, first we've got to get our terms straight. Let's break down the crucial distinction between these two experiences because it really matters. So the main difference really boils down to onset and intensity. See, anxiety, that often builds up gradually. It can be this persistent low-level hum of worry in the background. A panic attack, on the other hand, that's a sudden, intense wave of fear that hits you like a truck and usually peaks within about 10 minutes. And here's a really key point. You hear the term anxiety attack all the time, right? Well, that's not actually an official clinical diagnosis. A panic attack is. So we know what it feels like, but what's actually happening up in our heads? Let's geek out for a minute and take a look at the brain's wiring diagram to see how it cooks up these powerful responses. To really get the brain's fear response, you have to meet the star of the show, the amygdala. And the easiest way to think about it is like your brain's built-in smoke detector. It's always on, constantly scanning for danger, and it's ready to blast the alarm at the very first sign of trouble. And this diagram, wow, it just perfectly shows how that whole alarm system works. Take a look. Information from your senses, say a sudden noise or even just the context of a place you're in, it all flows into the amygdala. The amygdala processes this super fast, and if it thinks there's a threat, bam, it sends out the signal to trigger a fear response, like freezing on the spot. It's an incredibly rapid, automatic survival mechanism. Now, this is exactly how our brains learn what to be afraid of. It's a process called fear conditioning. So if something totally neutral, like a specific song or a place, gets paired with a really negative experience, your brain forges a link. And from then on, just hearing that song can be enough to set off the fear response, even when the original danger is long gone. But here's the really hopeful part of all this science. If our brains can learn to be afraid of something, it stands to reason they can also, well, not exactly unlearn it, but learn something new on top of it. Scientists have a name for this process, extinction, but honestly, the name is a little misleading. It's not about erasing that old fear memory. I mean, that connection is probably still in there somewhere. Instead, it's all about creating a new, stronger memory that basically shouts over the old one. It's a memory that teaches the brain, hey, you know what? This thing is safe now. So how does this new learning actually happen? It's a pretty straightforward process, though that doesn't always mean it's easy. Step 1, you encounter the trigger that sets off the fear. Step 2, the bad thing you're bracing for just doesn't happen. And step 3, as you repeat this, your brain starts to build that new, safe memory, and the old fear response gets weaker and weaker. This whole idea of creating new, safer associations, it's the bedrock for a lot of therapies. So let's take a look at one really popular approach, mindfulness, and ask a very simple question. Does the science actually say it works for anxiety? You know, mindfulness isn't just some passing trend. As this quote from back in 2013 shows, it's a serious therapeutic approach that researchers have been studying for a long time. But of course, popularity doesn't automatically mean it's effective. So what does the data say? Well, to find out, researchers conducted what's called a meta-analysis, which is basically a giant study of other studies. And it was huge. They didn't just look at a few papers. They compiled all the data from 209 different scientific studies on this very topic. And the number of people involved in all those studies, get this, more than 12,000 participants. With a sample size that massive, you can get a really powerful, really reliable look at the overall effect. So what did they find? This chart spells it out. It shows the effect size, which is just a fancy way of saying how well mindfulness works. Compared to doing nothing, you can see it has a really solid positive effect. It's also more effective than a lot of other general therapies. But now look at that last bar. When you put it head-to-head with the gold standard cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, the difference is practically zero. The big takeaway here, the evidence says mindfulness is just as effective. So the bottom line is this. After sifting through all of that data, the researchers reached a very clear conclusion.
Mindfulness-based therapy is an effective treatment. The evidence is there. It really works, especially for what we're talking about today, reducing anxiety and stress.
All right, let's zoom out and pull all these pieces together. We've gone from that subjective feeling of anxiety all the way to the brain circuits that create it, and finally to evidence-backed ways we can manage it. So, what are the big takeaways? First, just knowing the difference between anxiety and a panic attack gives us the power of having clear language for our experiences. Second, seeing the fear circuit as a biological smoke detector can help remove so much of the shame. It's not a personal failing, it's just wiring. And maybe most importantly, that wiring isn't permanent. It can be retrained and updated with new experiences.
And that really leaves us with this final, powerful idea. If fear is a learned biological process that our brains can literally update through new experiences, well, that changes everything. It means we don't have to be just passive victims of our anxiety. So the real question becomes, now that we know the science, how can we start to actively and intentionally change our relationship with fear?